Welcome everybody to Desayuno Inteligente, Intelligent Breakfasts Online, which we will have today with Sysarb. Please, we welcome our guests. Lena Molin, Chief Advisory Officer at Sysarb. Linnea has 10 years of experience from Comp & Ben, including several years at Mercer as Comp & Ben Manager at Klarna, running the total reward stream at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And the other speaker, Jessica Nyland, is Global Sales and Partnerships at Sysarb. And what the theme of today is that we're going to talk about the new EU directive on pay transparency, because Sweden is celebrated as one of the world's most transparent countries. So it came as no surprise when it led the way in publishing its local interpretation of the EU Pay Transparency Directive, EPTD, in May 2024. So Sysarb will guide us through Sweden's journey toward implementing pay transparency in this session, and they will explore the practical steps toward becoming transparency ready, from understanding legal obligations and defining a pay transparency roadmap to reviewing current pay practices. So the floor is yours, but if you have any questions, please feel free during this session to write it in the chat or raise your hand so you can get in directly. We will also have a question and answer in the end, but it's okay to jump in with your questions if you have. So please, Jessica, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So maybe to start, I would like to just introduce you to Sysarb, the company where we are employed. So Sysarb is a Swedish SaaS company, and it was founded 20 years ago. And all this time we have been focusing on software for pay gap reporting. And this is because the Swedish companies have been required by law to do this kind of reporting ever since the 1990s even. And actually the first law regarding equality in Sweden is dating back even to 1979. So indeed, Sweden is a country that has been taken early steps in this direction for many decades. But the European Union then decided on this new directive for pay transparency, and this directive is actually following the Swedish legislation quite close. So suddenly the software that we offer and the methodology in the software is really, it's a good timing, because a lot of companies now are requesting this kind of solution. So good timing for us. So Sysarb is a privately owned company, and we have been growing organically all these years. And today we have about 600 clients in 60 countries. And in addition to the software, we also offer advisory services. We have our own advisory team led by Linnea. And in addition, we also have an extensive partner network of pay equity experts in all European countries. Spain, of course, is one of them. Yes.
Yes, I will put on the first slide. Please tell me when to pass.
Yeah, you can move along to slide number 4. Or just showing, maybe first slide number 3.
Slide number 3.
Yes. Just showing you some samples of clients that are using Sysarb today. So there is a big mix between large international companies, but also small and mid-sized companies. The platform is flexible when it comes to the size of number of employees. And then next slide, number 4. Yes.
This is my turn then. I can give a short summary of the EU Pay Transparency Directive. So first of all, I think it's very good to just go back to the spirit of it, because oftentimes I come into very detailed conversations about how is this supposed to be interpreted, what about this, what about that, and I find that a lot of the time it's very helpful to just go back and think about what are they trying to achieve from a political standpoint. And it's actually quite simple. Equal work deserves equal pay, and for equal pay, you need transparency. So that's what they're trying to achieve. And if we go back to that and stick to that and let that guide us in our work around this directive, we will come a far way. The EU Pay Transparency Directive is a legislative initiative by the European Union, and it's aimed at promoting gender equality and addressing the gender pay gap across the member states. We can go to the next slide.
Can I just say, Anna, could you perhaps put the presentation in the presentation mode?
Yes,
make it a bit
of course.
larger.
Just a second.
Thank you.
Just a second.
Can you all hear Linnea? Okay.
Yes, we think it's okay.
Okay.
Great.
Yes.
Okay.
I hope this works.
Thank you. Yes, super. Just to simplify, the directive consists of three main parts. It's transparency pre-employment, transparency during employment, and public reporting. And with transparency pre-employment, we talk about pay ranges. For example, in job ads, they should be candidates should be presented with a range and a entry pay for entry salary for the job that they are applying for upfront. So that's what they're trying to get at. And it's also a prohibition to ask about previous pay. And this is because they have noticed that if you get into a vicious cycle of pay gap, it's hard to break that, because oftentimes managers, employers ask about what are your expectations, or what is your current pay, and the new salary is based on the history. So you really never get out of a pay gap from a holistic perspective if you already got into it. So that's why they said the employer needs to be sure enough, what are we prepared to pay for this position, rather than asking the candidate, what is your expectation or what is your previous pay? Transparency during employment, that's all about being able to present the pay gap between men and women that perform equal and equivalent jobs. We will come back a little bit to that. What is an equal job? What is an equivalent job? And public reporting, I think this is the part of the directive that gains most attention. In a way, I think that is strange, because the public reporting is probably going to be quite simple from a technical perspective. Of course, it's very important to know your pay gap, to control your pay gap, because it's going to be public to everyone. Some aggregated figures on the gender pay gap, but the difficult piece, I would say, is the middle one, to actually get involved, the employees get involved, and to be able to explain to them how come your salary is below your colleagues performing the equal pay, or etc. But the public reporting is aggregated figures. Probably it's going to be provided in Sweden, at least. The authorities is going to provide a specific website where these figures are going to be published. And I can move on. So one question that we often get is which organizations are covered by the directive? And actually, there are some thresholds when it comes to public reporting. I'll come back to that. But it's very important to note that all employers, regardless of size, must adhere to the specific to some of these transparency requirements. For example, the first one, providing pay ranges in the job ads. That's something that everyone needs to adhere to. The middle one as well, to allow workers to request pay data related to their position and gender. That's something that all organizations must adhere to. And actually, all organizations do need to conduct a joint pay assessment just to explore whether there is a 5% unjustified gender pay gap or not. If you have a gender pay gap that is greater than 5%, you have to do an in-depth analysis. If it's lower than 5%, it's enough to just at least in terms of the directive, this can be implemented in different way when it comes to national legislation. But the directive has a threshold of 5% when it comes to the gender pay gap. If it's smaller than that, the directive do not require an in-depth analysis. In Sweden, though, we did not have this threshold. So in the Swedish legislation, all pay gaps needs to be analyzed or fixed. And if we go to the next slide, to drill into the reporting and the thresholds that I was talking about. So when it comes to the report to the public, employers with more than 100 employees must report every 3 years, and employers with more than 250 employees must report every year. But that's for the public. That's the aggregated numbers that I was talking about. That's going to be published via a website, most likely. And to the authorities, at least in Sweden, what needs to be reported to Diskrimineringsombudsmannen in Sweden are the pay gaps on equal and equivalent jobs. And like I mentioned, if the difference is greater than 5%, this must be explained or addressed within 6 months. If you can't explain it and if you don't fix it, more or less, within 6 months, you will have to present the full analysis, the gender pay gap analysis, to the authorities. And when it comes to the employees, upon request, pay gaps on jobs that are of equal or equivalent value needs to be provided to the employees. And again, pay differences greater than 5% must be explainable. Any questions so far?
No questions?
No?
So it's
Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry. If you have any questions from the audience, we didn't ask the audience to introduce themselves, but if you would like to introduce yourself, please put in the chat where you are and which company you represent. It would be nice to get to know you because you are 17 people connected, which could be a great opportunity to say hi to each other. And so please put your name. I can start to put in the chat. And if you have any questions, please just feel free to jump in and ask them. Otherwise, we will ask in the end. But please, Linnea, continue.
Yeah. So we can stay on this slide for now. But something that I often hear is what happens if we're not ready in June 2026. This will go live at the latest in June 2026, according to the directive. And in this directive, it's very clear that the task of the member states is to make sure that organizations follow this directive, which means that new penalties and fines will be implemented, and they should be substantial enough so that organizations are motivated to follow this. In Sweden, we do have examples of exactly what fines will be implemented, what penalties will be implemented. For example, we have new penalties if you fail to do the public reporting. It can go up to as much as 500,000 krona. We have a new fine for breaking the transparency part of the directive. So, like Jessica was mentioning in the beginning, we are used to this kind of legislation in Sweden, but what we're not used to is the transparency part. So we're not used to talking to our employees, involving employees to this extent in the pay setting in the organizations. And if you breach that, there will be fines connected to that as well. Also, if you breach the transparency that you are supposed to provide to the unions, which is the unions get a lot more extended power in this directive. And I think the most noticeable one is that the historical the liability. So if it is we don't have any such examples of this in the European Union yet, of course, because this has not come into force. But we do have examples in the US, for example, where Disney, I saw, has been liable to pay back the missing. So if it has been determined that women has been lower paid than their equivalent men for 8-10 years, you basically just count back in time how much have they lost over the course of all of these years, and the employer is liable to pay back the full amount historically. So this is going to be new in the EU Pay Transparency Directive as well.
Great.
Yeah, so another question that I often get is, okay, we understand that this is something that we need to look into, so where do we start? And I always say that you have to start with the structure. So it's about the job architecture, and it's about the master data, of course. Actually, when I speak about this, it's not uncommon that the terminology job architecture is unknown, or maybe we're not really sure about what is that, do we have it, etc. So I often explain, like, just briefly, what is a job architecture? And something that I find helpful is to think about a job architecture as a house. So we can click up the next slide, or same slide, but the picture. So just like a floor plan of a house provides an overview, the job architecture also provides an overview of an organization. We have different rooms in a house that fulfills different functions, and it's just the same in an organization. You can think of each room as a job family. So we have HR, we have IT, etc. And then within each room, we have furniture, where we can think of each piece of furniture as a job profile. And together, the furniture in the room makes the room fit for purpose. Just like all of the job profiles that we have within one job family makes that function fit for purpose. And this is very helpful when we think about the EU Pay Transparency Directive, because, like I mentioned before, we need to provide a lot of data based on equal and equivalent work. And then we need to be able to determine what is an equal and equivalent work. So in this example, we can think of each piece of furniture as an equal job. So a kitchen chair, for example, has the same function in the same room as the same job profile. And all of our employees sitting on a kitchen chair can then be compared to each other in terms of having an equal job. But we can also think about positions in different rooms. So, for example, we might have a kitchen chair, but there could also be an office chair in another room, which is the office. And if we think about the functionality, the complexity, and what we are probably prepared to pay for that piece of furniture, it might be similar, even though they are not exactly the same. They are have slightly different functions because they're in different rooms in the job architecture, but they can still be compared and argued that they have equivalent value to the house. So that's how we can think about equal and equivalent jobs in a job architecture or in a house. We can also think about it as a house can have different floors of the building, and that can visualize the career path. So you can move up in the organization to different floors, and that can also visualize maybe different benefits are connected to a certain level of the house, etc. So all of these things will be a part of the directive, that you need to explain equal and equivalent jobs. You need to be able to compare them, and you also need to be able to explain what is the career path for an employee.
Can I ask you a question, Linnea?
Salary.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. What challenges do you think the companies will find in doing this architecture?
Sorry, what challenge do you think
the companies will find in doing this architecture?
Typically, it's a very good cleaning job. So I can just think about my house. I'm looking at my desk here in front of me. And when I'm home alone working, I can admit it's a little bit messy. I have a coffee cup that's lying around. I actually have the gloves of my son. They shouldn't be here. They should be up in the hallway. And this is so typical also for organizations. When you don't have to showcase it to anyone, it tends to get a little bit messy. So job profiles are not, they might have the wrong titles, you might have furniture in the wrong room, etc. So it's a cleaning job that needs to be done. And you can compare it a little bit. So if, for example, if I would have guests coming to my house tonight for dinner, I would clean up a little bit. Make sure that its coffee cups are not lying around, etc. But if you think about if I was gonna sell my house and have the public coming in and viewing it, I would probably get professional cleaners to come in and help me. And it's the same thing that happens now with the EU Pay Transparency Directive. All of a sudden, we invite the public into our houses, into our organizations, to say, look, this is what it looks like. Come and have a look at our organization. And that's why we really, really need to pay attention to make sure that we know where are our employees sitting, what is the pay range they should have, and how are they compared within the organization. So we need to take a good look at our job profiles that we have today, the titles that we have today. And when we do this, and we need to evaluate all of our furniture as well to have a clear stance. So what are we actually prepared to pay for a sofa? How much is it worth for us in our house? And how does that compare to a kitchen chair, for example? And this is the work that we need to do. And oftentimes when we evaluate the furniture, if you put it that way, or the job profiles, a lot of things, I mean, it's exactly the same when you clean your house. You dig up so much and you're like, this shouldn't even be in this room. Let's put it where it should be. Or this one, I paid so much for this lamp, but honestly, I could have gotten a similar one at another store. Maybe it's not reasonable. So you need to sort of be aware of your house, make sure it's cleaned up, make sure everything is in place, and that you can, so that in a way that you can show it to the public and be proud of it.
That was a really good metaphor.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. Maybe you can tell us how Sysarb could help us in that sense.
Yeah, of course. And I think both me and Jessica can answer that question, but I can maybe start with, from an advisory perspective, how we support our clients, and Jessica can also show, or not show, maybe not today, but she can explain explain a little bit about the software that we have and how that can support. But from an advisory perspective, we provide these professional cleaning services, you can say. So we help our clients to clean up their houses, to make sure everything is in order, and also give a bit of best practice. We could say that maybe interior design support, what is typical for another organization of your size in your industry. How do we suggest that you furnish your rooms to make it fit for purpose, and also to create awareness of the current pay gap, to analyze the current positions, and help the client to think around. I think I would definitely recommend everyone to do a pay gap analysis next year before the directive goes live, so that you are prepared and you also have some time to maybe fix some salaries that you that are misplaced, that where the pay gaps are very big and you can't explain it, to make sure that you have time to put everything in order before it goes live and the public is invited in 2026. So those are all of the services that we can support with, along with comp and ben services, etc. But I think the job architecture, the structure, and the pay equity analysis is really what organizations are focusing on right now. Jessica, would you like to add something there?
Yeah, so maybe mentioning a bit about the software, how it helps. So the software that Sysarb offers, it's an all-in-one solution, enabling companies to comply with the directive. And it's all the aspects from the house, cleaning the house, working with your job architecture, doing the pay equity analysis, get supported by the reporting in the different countries if you operate in other countries than Spain, for example, and also about communicating to your employees regarding salaries. So being transparent in a safe way, you could say. So as Linnea mentioned earlier, according to the directive, you need to be transparent toward the public, the government, and the employees. And this is really what the software supports you with. And the platform, I should mention as well, is also available in several major European languages, and Spanish is one of them.
Important.
Yes, important. And also when it comes to the reports that you're supposed to do and provide your government, your local government, the reports will also be available in Spanish according to the local Spanish legislation. That is the adaptation of the Pay Transparency Directive to the Spanish context. So I think that is one of the major advantages of using the platform. So keeping track of the legislation that will differ in all the countries in Europe when it comes to the reporting, when it comes to the analysis, will be one of the most, I think, the biggest advantages of having support from a software, because it's a complex area. It's doing the calculation is super complex. So the larger the company, the more employees, the greater the advantage of being supported by a software.
How long do you think a company will need to get ready? Example, 100 employees.
Yeah, so it all depends on where you start, I would say.
I suppose, yes.
How good is your data today? How well do you know your organization already when it comes to the pay gaps, but also when it comes to the structure that Linnea talked about? Do you know, is there really a good structure already, perhaps, when it comes to your job titles in the company, the salary ranges? If you operate in more than Spain, maybe operate in Spain, Italy, and Portugal. Are you referring to the same job when you say software engineer or project manager? or do they differ between countries? It depends on the starting point. But just as Linnea said, the best thing is really to aim for doing your first analysis in 2025, because then you have a starting point and you can start investigating where do we have our weak spots and what do we have time to do before going public 1 year later. So that is really the best starting point, I would say.
Can I ask, in this context, artificial intelligence, how can you tell us if you will use it, if you could supplement it in this context? What will the artificial intelligence affect?
I can answer that question. So I think AI should definitely be utilized in our modern society. It's a superpower that can be very helpful. But when I also would like to give some caution for this, because if you use a general application such as ChatGPT, for example, it's not trained for this specific purpose. And that means that things can go wrong. Like, for example, I use ChatGPT to help me calculate the pay gap between men and women. It's just that ChatGPT gave me the pay gap between men and women and men. So obviously it's the two sides of the same coin, but it's a huge difference to talk about the pay gap between men and women versus women and men. It's just wrong. And if you're not on your toes, you might miss these things. And I also seen that, I mean, ChatGPT, for example, it's very good for providing text, but it's not as good with maths. So I've prompted it with quite sort of simple maths problems, and it miscalculated that. And when I prompted with how are you arriving to this results, it actually just says, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. So ChatGPT makes mistakes. And when it comes to these things, because you're inviting the public, you're inviting your employees to view these numbers, you are putting them in the hands of your managers that are supposed to explain this to employees. You want to make sure that you're safe with the numbers. So I really encourage you to use, if you're going to use AI, use something that is trained on this specific topic. That's my comment. Do you have something to add, Jessica?
Just maybe that there are some AI features in the platform today already. For example, you get some help from the AI to draw conclusions from a large population of data. That's giving you insights about the group when it comes to reasons for why do we have a pay gap in a specific group, for example. So we are already using AI, but under very controlled, in a controlled context. Yes.
Yeah, and that's a good example of where I would feel safe to use AI and where I would really encourage everyone to use AI, because it's very powerful and it can really, really help you to analyze the pay gaps, to easily see who should I focus on in this chart, for example, of employees, what's an outlier. So it adds a lot of insights. And if you use it within the within a software that is trained for pay equality, for example, you can feel safe that it's actually analyzing the right things. So that's totally fine.
Interesting. We have some audience that have introduced themselves in the chat, so that's very nice to see.
Yeah.
If someone's missing, please say hello, or someone just connected, please feel free to say hello in the chat and also to make questions. So I think we could pass to Q&As if someone has a question for this, except for me, I have several. So please feel free. You don't have to raise your hand, you just start talking. So how is is this, because this is when you started to talk about this with me. I didn't really hear about it here in Spain. I think it was new. So what is this? No, and I searched on it on Google. I didn't find anything, but at least this was for a few months ago. But there's nobody really talking about this here, at least. How is the situation in Sweden? Is this something that you talk about in the companies that you?
Yeah, I think the awareness in Sweden is very high. And in Sweden, I would say that organizations are concerned about the fact that in just 2 pay cycles, we don't have 2 more pay cycles to fix things. And after that, we will have to be so confident with the pay of each and every individual that it's fair, so that we can sit eye to eye with that individual and say, this is your pay, this is why you earn this much, and your colleague earns 15, 20,000 more than you every month, for example. And I would say when I speak to clients, I haven't spoken to anyone that are that confident today. So definitely this is something that is it's a hot topic. What do you think, Jessica?
Yeah, it is a hot topic, but still, I don't remember if we talked about that at the beginning, but Sweden is actually the only country this far that has come up with our implementation proposal of the directive. And rumors say that Germany and Spain might be next. But still, of all the countries in Europe, there are no country yet who has come up with a date when will our country present our implementation of the directive. And time is ticking. I mean, it's 1.5 years to go to June 2026. So the longer the country or the government is waiting, the more stress it will be at the end for the companies that should adhere to the legislation. But I guess that is one of the reasons why we have a high awareness, because our government has been acting. So let's
definitely
hope that Spain will follow soon as well.
We have a comment from Eva. Because the European directive is still not approved, when it will be, the topic will start to be in the news because the law will need to be transposed. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a huge thing, exactly to your point also, Jessica, that we have made a move in Sweden, so there is something to analyze, there is something to concrete to sort of, let's say, worry about in Sweden, whereas in other countries it still might feel like it's a long way off.
Thank you, Eva Cebolla, for that comment too. Would you like to add something more? Does anyone have a question regarding this? Please feel free to jump in. You don't have to put your picture on if you don't want to. You can just talk. Would you like to add something more, Jessica and Linnea?
I mean, if you do have questions and for whatever reason you want to take that after this call, then we are more than happy to book another meeting where we can show the system, give a short demo of it. And we definitely, yes, we can share the presentation. I can see the questionnaire now from Alberto. So don't hesitate. We will be here to help you if you have any concerns or issues.
It will also be great to if you could make a presentation or demo, or when the companies contact you, maybe you could show them your tool. That would be nice to you manage.
Yes, absolutely. I guess, Anna, you would be able to distribute our contacts.
Yes, of course. I will send an email directly after with your presentation to the whole audience registered.
There is a new question from Eva. Do you know dates where directive is going to be talked in the European Parliament? So I guess the question is when the directive will go active. When in June? I think it's June 12th, or is it June? Do you remember, Lynn? 10th or 12th?
I mean, to be technical about it, the directive is already in force. It was voted in March 2023, and then the actual implementation in national law can differ a little bit, but it's June 2026 at the latest. So it's good to note that it could also be earlier, and the date can differ a little bit depending on the country. But for Sweden, it's going to be June 2026.
Yeah. And I would, because I would like to add to that. So from June 2026, the transparency part of the directive comes into force. So even though the reporting, because the first report that you probably will have to make then would be in 2027, presenting the data of 2026. But from June 2026 already, your employees of your company will start asking their managers questions about their salaries compared to their colleagues doing the same or the similar job as they do. And the question to you is then, is your managers prepared? Will they be prepared to handle this information when they should answer all these questions? And if not, it's really time to start working on that soon, I would say, because when it's about human beings, it is a big effort. It's a cultural change in the company. So please be aware of this, I would say, as an advice.
Definitely. And we got a question there, if we could put the a link to the actual directive, or they ask us for the directive number. So I'm checking here if I can find it, and I'll post it in the chat.
Oh, that would be nice.
Great. Any other questions? Is any one of the participants here, have you started yet to prepare in your company for the directive? What is the status, if anyone?
Alberto makes a question there too, in the chat. If it will be anonymous, I mean, the names of the colleagues.
Yes, it will be anonymous.
Yes.
So if we look upon the Swedish implementation, it will be the median salary of a group of people that will be transparent, for example. So then you would get information about how do I, as an employee, how does my salary relate to the median salary of my group? So the individual salaries will not be disclosed, no.
But it's interesting. It's an interesting question, because in Sweden we have had conversations about this. What happens if the sample is very small? So in theory, it's only one woman in a group of equal or equivalent jobs, or one position, or one individual even. And in Sweden, the talk is that, because we talk about obviously GDPR and sensitive data, etc., and those two directives could potentially conflict each other. So in Sweden, we said that gender pay and transparency is so important. So it would, in that case, it would outrule the GDPR and the right to privacy of your data. And then, of course, we don't have any cases yet. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to note that that's how Sweden look at it. Then we have another question. What is really expected from the local legislation? And it's expected that each member state, or sorry, maybe probably your question was what is expected from how do we expect Spain interpret this legislation? Was that the question, Gabriela? Yes. I actually, I don't know. I would suggest maybe Jessica has something to say. No?
Unknown.
So we do have a.
It's unknown as far as I know.
Yeah, I think it's pretty scarce, the information on that topic. But I could suggest that you get in touch with our partner, right, Jessica, Esperta, in Spain. Maybe they have more information. So we do have a Spanish partner, and they might be more informed about what we expect from the Spanish interpretation of the directive. So maybe we can send. There is no transposition law still. Eva is replying to everyone here. Yeah, I would assume that we don't have much information on that yet, but there will be, exactly.
You will write there.
Lately, I'm talking about laws and with gender. Spain lately has been very soon. Sorry for my English. Early. I mean, sorry. Spain has been very early with legislation in gender issues lately. So maybe we can expect that Spain will be early this time too.
Yeah, I think talks of the town is that Spain will move, and Germany. That's what we expect. That we will get some news from Spain and Germany, at least next year. But let's see.
Interesting. Jessica just posted in the chat the website of the Spanish partner, Esperta. So please can have a look at that. And Linnea also posted the link to the directive number of the.
We can read a little bit more about it, and you find all of the details there if you click around. So
that's good.
Yeah.
Great. And I assume when we will know about the Spanish proposal on how to implement the directive in Spain, we could set up another webinar, perhaps, to see where you stand by then, and also providing you more information how Sysarb will be able then to support you when that is, whenever that is.
That's a very good idea. I think we all will be very interested in that. Sounds good.
Great.
I think this was a very interesting session with great news, good questions from the audience, and looking forward to see for the next session when the laws are getting active, so to say. And just saying that if this has been recorded, it will be on the Spanish-Swedish Chamber of Commerce website, YouTube, and social media. We will post this, and really thank you, Jessica and Linnea, and for your input, for your initiative, and the audience for your interaction. And we will send you the presentation to all the audience, to your emails, and maybe I could send to the link to the directive and the name of your Spanish partner, maybe. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Great.
Right.
Thank you everyone for attending this webinar.